Will the members of the committee please introduce themselves?
Good morning, Commissioner Mark Shaw.
Chair Tweedy Smith.
Commissioner Martha Schrader.
Director Paul Savas.
Oh, there you go.
Macy Gast, citizen.
Eric Shawn, citizen.
And Director Fisher, are you here?
I did not announce that. Do we need to?
If you would please announce your meeting as the.
Yeah, it's not in my script. I recess as the Board of County Commissioners Budget Committee and convene as the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District Budget Committee. I will now accept nominations from the floor for chair.
I nominate Macy Gast for chair.
Second.
Macy Gass has been nominated as chair, and the motion has been seconded. Any other further comments or nominations from the floor? Hearing none, please call the poll.
Yes. Mr. Gast,
Aye.
Mr. Shawn,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader, Chair Smith.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Congratulations on our new chair. I turn the meeting over to you.
Okay. I'll now open the floor for nominations for secretary.
I moved to nominate Eric Shawn as secretary.
I'll second that motion.
Mayor Shawn has been nominated. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, nominations are closed. Clerk, would you please call the poll?
Mr. Shawn,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader, Chair Smith,
Aye.
Chair Gast.
Aye. Okay. The result, the vote is 7-0. Mr. Shawn has been elected secretary. I will now ask that Mike Bork, Director of the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District, to present the budget message.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me on my first budget hearing presentation. I'm just going to jump right into these slides and allow as much time as possible for questions. So under our 2021 major accomplishments for the district, that we had several major things that happened. The biggest one of note is separating from business and community services and becoming our own standalone department as of July 1st. In addition to that, we have basically spent since the beginning of the fiscal year, since July, starting to come out of the pandemic in our programs and activities. We also formed the District Advisory Committee and got them up and running in this fiscal year, as well as bringing myself, Mike Bork, the new director on in this fiscal year. So there's been a lot of changes. But our major accomplishments, as you can see in our program community center, older adult services, parks, trails, and natural areas really are all related to continuing our ongoing efforts that we normally do, but also with that eye towards coming out of our pandemic response. Within planning and development, our major accomplishment that's not listed here is I was able to hire a full-time planning manager to fill what had been a temporary held position, which is our first step towards building up our planning and development division, which is severely understaffed at this point. Next slide, please. You can see from our Performance Clackamas measures, we continue to work towards meeting our performance goals within our Performance Clackamas, and we've seen some very good successes as far as 100% compliance with our Meals on Wheels services. Others that struggle more, like our asset development and trying to complete project phases. That's almost directly related to the staffing challenges that I just talked about. But in general, we continue to move forward and plan to achieve as many of our goals as we can in this upcoming fiscal year. Next slide, please. If you look at the breakdown of our revenue and expenses, you can get a better understanding of how our finances come in and then go out. You can see in our revenue side, That 61% of the pie chart is from our beginning fund balance, as well as other big parts of our revenue, 14% in taxes, 15% from interfund charges. And on the expense side, 46% you see is our capital outlay plan, and 22% is reserved or budgeted in here for our materials and services, which is really our operating funds, as well as a 9% contingency and an 8% reserve for future expenditures as well. Next slide, please. When we start looking at the summary of our revenue and expenses by overall funds, you can see that we are proposing what looks like an increase from $38.3 million to $54.9 million. But that is mostly, if not the large bulk of it, is related to interfund charges of moving funds from one area to the other. It counts as an increase and an expense. But in general, the biggest increases to the proposed budget outside of that is we started with a much higher beginning fund balance than what we had anticipated. Some of that is due to ARPA money, but a lot of it is due to less expenditures and more revenue in the previous fiscal year. And then also a $16.6 million transfer amount to better reflect what our reserve funds are and not just have them incorporated into other funds. Altogether, in our general fund, we're going up a very small amount, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. But we did also keep a $2.373 million budgeted amount in our contingency, which represents about 20% of our operating budget. Next slide. This is breaking down into our different funds as our Performance-Clackamas breaks it out, our 5 main areas of administrative, community center, older adult services, parks, trails, and natural areas, and planning and development. So that's what makes up our general fund. And remember, our general fund is from NCPRD, not county general fund funds involved at all. Altogether, our requested amount for this upcoming year's fiscal year reflects a negative 0.6% change. So our proposed budget is coming in lower than last year's proposed operating budget. The other funds, these non-program, non-operating funds, this is new in how we've laid this out in this year, but seems to be reflective of how others do. These are our capital improvement plan. You can see it, $12.8 million. We have a capital repair and replacement budget proposed of $1.4 million. You see the system development charge transfers is a small amount of $37,000. But these bigger amounts, this $13.0 million in transfers, that $2.373 that I talked about in contingency, and then a $14.69 million transfer to our reserves. And that gives us our overall operating budget as a general by fund summary. Next slide. We listed 3 significant policy or financial issues. I talked about the first one at the beginning, being separated from business and community services and becoming our standalone department. We were able to use some of our realized savings to increase our full-time equivalency positions and realign some positions. That was the opportunity that we took advantage of. But we also budgeted for planned projects only and put the rest of the money into our reserve account. So in the past, the way that our budget was reflected is when we showed the capital budget of $22 million, that wasn't with the plan that we were going to spend all $22 million that fiscal year. It was about $12 or $13 million worth of capital projects, and the rest was basically unallocated funding. And so what I've done this year to be more transparent in our budget is to take any of the unallocated funding that wasn't specifically allocated at this point to capital or SDC or other expenditures like that and put them into that reserve account that I had talked about earlier, which to me is a more transparent way to show what we actually have in our operations versus our reserves. So that was the second one. And then just wanted to also mention our staffing challenges. We mentioned it in planning and development, but that continues on even into our part-time and seasonal staff that we're trying to bring on for lawn maintenance and park maintenance and lifeguarding staff. So the staffing challenges are across the board. It is directly affecting some of our operations, not too much as we are starting to come into our summer season. It's much more on the operational side on planning and development that we're feeling the biggest pinch right now. But those positions are authorized. We just have not been successful in recruiting those planning positions as of yet. We're restarting. But other than the separation, the planned projects and trying to show things more transparently, our budget has not adjusted very much, and we tried to be reasonable where we did make increases, but we also did several decreases as well by combining part-time positions to create some of the full-time positions and other techniques like that. With that, I believe, next slide, that is the end of our presentation. So I would like to open it up for any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Do you have any, do any of the members of the committee have any questions?
Yeah, I've got some. So I just want to just preface my comments and just say that since 2017-18 approximately, when we heard some of the unhappiness from our city partners, that my concern has been about the best interest in the future of the district. And Happy Valley did withdraw and acted on their concerns. And Milwaukee has been unclear because they have been messaging for a significant number of years here, and most recently last 4 or 5 years about their interests at times of withdrawing. So my concern after December 2019, when Happy Valley was official as it departed the district, it's been the interest of myself and others, including the parks director at the time and also the department director, that we get our agreements in place so we can move the district forward. And we got and discussed last year the budget, the funding agreement for Milwaukee Bay Park, which is a good thing. So we got that done. I know there's another one that we need to do, but there is an existing one in place. My concern going forward is any investments we make, systems plan work that you're doing, Mike, which is good, the SEC work that we need to do, which is good. But if those are done on the premise that the district remains whole, great. If it doesn't, then I'm worried about a stranded investment or a lost investment, frankly. So with that in mind, I want to just touch a couple of things. You mentioned reserves. Can you point to us the page in which those reserves are spelled out as reserves?
I believe it would be page 6 on the summary of revenues and expenses.
Okay, page. Well, so I have the budget book. So page 6 is a blank page.
We were told we're using the presentation slides from here, not the budget book.
Okay, so, well, I'm gonna refer to the book quite a bit.
Okay?
So I'm happy to use page 6 if you like for that. For at least
Everybody
that
have a
one
copy of that
question.
budget book? Okay. So Elizabeth Gomez is accompanying me, our financial administrative manager. So she'll be able to locate by
So-
budget page.
Thank you. So, excuse me, so the reserves are found on a couple different pages in the budget. Page 1,
Can you speak up or move the mic forward?
no.
No
I'll
light.
just talk louder. Is
There
that
you go.
better? So on page 114, you'll find the reserves in the SDC total budget.
Reserves for SDCs, you said?
right.
I still can barely hear you. Can you just pick up that
Sorry.
mic a little bit?
Speak right.
Oh, it's on. Okay, that better?
Oh, much better.
Sorry. Page 114, you'll find a budget line for reserve for future expenditures in the SDC budget. So that's, you'll see that's 6.8 million. Sorry, my glasses.
Okay, I need to ask a technical question right
Yep.
now. I think it's just so we all save ourselves some time. So the definition of reserves doesn't seem to be, the nomenclature here seems to be different. Reserve for future expenditures is not necessarily, or is it reserves or a reserves policy?
So it might be reflected differently, but the reserves here are restricted for future expenditures. So we're not spending it this fiscal year. We can't. It's restricted. We can't even come to ask you to spend those. So they're truly
Held in reserve.
held in reserve for the future. So 23, 24, 24, 25, as we move forward, we'll look to those funds
Okay.
to spend.
I found a page, I don't know which one it is, there's several, I got dog-eared here, about the contingency policy, but I don't see much language unless I didn't find it. And please point me out if there is a discussion in the book about the reserves policy.
I don't believe there's a discussion on the
Okay.
reserves policy. We can certainly add that.
Okay. It was I struggled to find it, so thank you, that explains it. And then the other page? for
The other
reserves?
page would be page 125, which is our capital improvement projects. So 5.9 million there.
Okay, so it is same language, reserve for future expenditures. So I guess I just have a question for our finance experts. Does that qualify for reserves policy, or is it unique to the language for its reserve for, I think I'm hearing staff say, or NCPRD staff say that it is reserves.
That is consistent with our practice in the county. Reserves are reserved for future expenditures and not in the current fiscal year.
Okay.
So it is consistent.
All right, thank you. So before I get too far adrift here, the funding agreement that's in place that the board approved for Milwaukee Bay Park was about 9-point-something million.
9.6.
9.6.
5.6 was our.
Great. But I'm worried because it looks, I don't want anyone to think that we're cutting that project, because when I go to the capital side, I don't see that 9.8, I see 5-something million. So is there a place where that 9.8 commitment, which we want to honor?
We made a commitment for 5.6, not 9.6. 9.6 is the total project cost,
Okay.
including hard costs and soft costs.
Okay.
In the financial agreement that you're referencing, we committed to the $5.6 million, which accounted for $3 million from Metro local share, and then SDC amounts to basically make up the bulk of the rest of that, about 2.5, and then there was a small amount of general NCPRD general fund to make up the difference.
Right, okay. So thank you for that, and a great segue into what I want to talk about. So typically in a budget, on the capital projects, they're pretty well defined as what the estimated cost is going to be, right? And on page 130, on Milwaukee Bay Park, I don't see the mention, again, I could be lost, maybe it's somewhere else, but of the 9.6. Is there anywhere?
The 9.6 is a total project amount. These pages reflect what we anticipate spending this next fiscal year.
Okay. Is there a place in the budget, like previous budgets, where the capital cost for each of these is estimated, whether it's going to be funded that year or not, for future expenditures?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. So on page 133 is the Concord project. So we estimate spending $6.4 million. Then, if I go by your definition of what we're going to spend this year for a project, can you define what that project is?
Well, 6.451 is what is outlaid for our expenditures based on design. Most of that, as you can see, it's design and construction. So some of this is money that we have already spent but have not necessarily paid for. But the 6.4 reflects what we think we might be able to spend this year. It doesn't say that we're going to spend all of it. In the past, the way we reflected it was we would just put this number and lump it in with that reserve amount. So we never really knew how much was actually planning on potentially being spent. So I can't say for 100% that we're going to spend 6.451, but that's the amount that we've got allocated from past budgets and was estimated by our planning and development manager to be, if things all moved along exactly as they needed to, that's what we theoretically could spend. Same answer for Milwaukee Bay Park. It's not that we know that this fiscal year, or this upcoming fiscal year, we wouldn't necessarily be spending all of the money that we've got budgeted for any individual project.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like I'll just leave it alone and just say that I see the box and it says for construction on bottom page, left corner, the left corner box, bottom of 133, it says 4 million for construction. So I know that project's much higher than that. So that's why I kind of raised the question, but I'll just realize that it's not complete as far as
Yeah,
defining.
it's not the complete project budget. This
okay.
is just next year's fiscal
All right,
plan.
thank you. I want my friends at Milwaukee to know that we're not cutting their project, or our friends in the Concord Oak Grove area know that we're cutting their project. Go ahead.
And I also wanted to point out, the reason that you might be slightly confused is this $4 million that you see in construction, and on the previous page for under Milwaukee Bay Park, there's an additional $1 million in there. That was additional funding that I asked to be transferred for the Budget Committee's consideration to supplement the construction projects. So recognizing that there were significant funding gaps in both projects, I asked for $1 million, and this is outside of all of the transfers and reserves and all of that. This was part of our operational capital plan, is to put $4 million additional out of our reserves into the Concord project and $1 million into Milwaukee Bay Park to help supplement both of those projects.
Yeah, and let me just, thank you, Mike. I just want to say that I know you weren't here last year and you're new, so take my comments and questions in a constructive way. I'm glad to see the changes because it's more clear, and I think it maybe could have some more improvements in the future. So on page 14, this is probably the one that's kind of, I'm just having a hard time tracking it. And Elizabeth, maybe you can be the person here, but this $13,052,626 comes up a lot, but I'm having a hard time tracking where it exactly all went.
Where are you? Right here?
On page 14
Right.
of the book.
Right here.
Right, it's 13 million.
Thank you.
right there.
All right, thank
Yep.
you.
So where can I find where that all went?
So if you turn to page 19, it talks about those transfers, that $13 million transfer total.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
On page 19.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay. Then turn to page 20, and it shows the transfers out from the general fund and the SDC fund, which that's the total of the 13 million. So 8.9 million is transferred out of the general fund into capital projects. 4.1 million is transferred from SDCs into capital projects. And then we have about a $549,000, I'm sorry, 3.5 is from SDCs to capital projects. And then the balance of that is from SDCs to the general fund. We pay for staffing that's related to capital projects, and we can charge those back to SDCs.
Okay, so help me out, maybe I'm not seeing it. I'm on page 20.
Yep.
And I see the 8.9 quite a bit. So are we looking at the blue box in the middle of the page, or are we talking about the line items at the top of page 20?
Kind of all of them. If you add up those three, it should be the 13 million.
Right.
Okay, so if I go across the line, I take the 3 point, where it says total, 3.5 plus, that comes to 13?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's just the product of how we have to show transfers within funds. It makes it a little more confusing. It's the transparent way to do it, but it just needs to be understood kind of at that level, that yes, those three different transfers of SDCs out to capital, SDCs out to general fund, and then transfers out to capital, those are all those three that add up to that amount.
Okay. Page 29. Towards the bottom of the page, talks about department milestones, and one that stuck out is the third from the bottom, restoration of Elk Rock Island completed. Is Elk Rock Island within the boundaries of NCPRD?
It is within the boundaries. The confusion has been that it was not part of our original IGA, going back with the city of Milwaukee back to the beginning. It was never included. There was a transfer, and I may get some of these mixed up, but there was, Elk Rock Island was originally within the city of Portland, or Portland Parks and Rec, or City of Portland. Was transferred to City of Milwaukee under an IGA. We were asked to assist with, and I don't remember what year that was, that we were asked to assist with Elk Rock Island in general, and especially after the wildfires, to assist, since we have the expertise in wildlife and habitat restorations. It is not still technically something that is on our existing list of IGA supported parks that we are under management, but it has been functionally, for at least the last several years, a park that we have maintained and done management on.
Are we being remunerated for that?
No.
Okay, so essentially, I'll just simplify my concern here. I was on the board at the time. Was the property of the city of Portland, never has been within the boundaries of the district. We're expending district funds. If we're not being remunerated, agreements or not, we're expending district funds outside the district boundaries.
Yes.
That's not legal unless we're being remunerated for it.
Well, and that's what I'm just now starting to figure out as we were talking about IGA language and agreements and IGAs between different parties. I can tell you that the overall impact is fairly de minimis compared to our overall budget. It's about $24,000 of work, direct cost work that we do out there currently per year. So of a $10 million operating budget, it's about $24,000. I was okay with leaving that going on until we could figure out what the status actually needs to be.
Yeah, and for the sake of my colleagues, that has been one of the issues why we've been trying to get this master IG completed and understood what those arrangements were, and that's been something we've been working on for 5 years and haven't had much traction. So, okay, on page 60, I'm trying to understand this one sentence here. It is paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth paragraph. Fourth paragraph, where this paragraph starts out as reading transfers to our budget at 13.1, but is the second sentence, I'm trying to understand what it means. Transfers within NCPRD budget as a whole balance and net to zero. What does that mean?
That's what I'd explained earlier. When we have a transfer, it's counted both as an expenditure and as a revenue when we transfer it within ourselves. So that nets to zero. So even though it shows as a large increase to our operating budget, that's the point that I was making, is really a lot of that is due to the transfers. When you transfer money around, it's going to wind up being a net zero gain. We're moving it from one fund to another.
Okay, I've asked a lot of questions, took a lot of time. I have a couple more, but maybe some of my other colleagues have some, so I'll just take a break here.
I appreciate that. I have a question, comment.
Please, go ahead. Commissioner Smith.
So can you point to any decision point and/or approval from this Parks District for the addition of Elk Rock Island? Was a motion made? Was there meeting minutes?
Not that I've been able to find, Chair.
So it's somehow assumed that this Park District is going to, take care of this rock in the middle of the Willamette River that will probably flood, and is going to take probably yearly repairs to mitigate the flooding and all the others. I don't like it on the list, and I want it removed. Gary, how do we do that?
Thank you. I would say not today, because you're not sitting as, well, you're sitting as the board of NCPRD, but the budget committee, not the board of directors by itself. So I would say you can do that next week if you want to take that action, or make a note today that you want it out of the budget. Is it actually in your budget, or is that just?
It's just absorbed as part of our park operations.
Okay.
See, that's the problem. It's a mission creep without us being approved, and the money goes out here. I mean, you know, my hat's off to the city of Milwaukee sneaking that booger in, but we're not going to pay for that because it was not approved. The DAC did not discuss it. So I think Gary and Elizabeth, we need to figure this out moving forward, and I'm not quite sure how to do that.
So if you want to modify the budget, today's the day to do it. If you want to dismantle the agreement, that's something you can do separately when the board meets again. So is there an actual line item in your budget for this
No.
project?
No, but that's the problem. There's no line item, but it's assumed. And therefore, if it's assumed, pretty soon we're going to find ourselves in a situation where the city of Milwaukee is demanding this district to pay for a whole menu of items. And I don't like doing business that way. It's not the proper way to do it. Mike, it was not you. I understand that. So we need to make a budget adjustment on this, and then if we have to come back as the DAC to eliminate this, then we will.
So what I'm hearing is that it's not a line in this budget, so if you agree to approve this budget today, you could, and then the Board of Directors will have you meet the next week or two to discuss this item and have it as a change of
I still have a
focus.
problem with that, because it's mentioned on page 29, under the department milestones. I don't like that at all in 2021. It will be assumed, if we approve this budget, and I assume we are approving all of the nomenclature and supporting Word documents that go with the budget.
So that's already occurred, that's in the past, that's just a milestone document.
All I would need would be direction from the board saying that you don't want me spending dollars. Again, it's nothing that's highlighted in our operational budget. It was that $24,000 number I said was the accounting or estimation from our park staff on how much time they spend out there on Elk Rock Island. We don't need to do that operation. It wouldn't impact our budget. We would just not spend the money there. We would put it elsewhere. But there's nothing in the budget that is tied directly to Elk Rock Island operations.
So there's no program development, there's no any type of development, but like you say, FTE is being spent out there.
And that's what if we got the direction from the board not to do that, we wouldn't do that.
Gary, how do you want to proceed?
Just do it today, commissioners, or directors, do it today. You're meeting as the NCPRD board, make that decision, make that direction as part of the budget.
I might add, just to build on this, is that there's been years of expenditures. So it's not just this expenditure, it's past expenditures that have been made. Same problem exists.
I think we can start here, Commissioner Savas. At least we were able to identify one.
Commissioner Fisher?
I have a couple questions, but on this issue, and we haven't noticed this issue, we're here for budget. I have a concern with moving forward on a more policy issue during a budget time without a proper notice, because there might be things that we're not considering. So that would be my thought about this, but I do have a budget question that is really basic. I don't know if now is the time to ask it, or if we want to wait. I'll leave that to the chair.
Commissioner Fisher, please.
Okay, so I'm taking us out of the Elk Rock conversation and to the summary of revenue and expenses. Is that all right? Okay, so you said it and you did it pretty fast, and I'm not sure that I understood it, and I really appreciate it. But I'm trying to understand, when you look at the total revenue, and there's such an increase in the summary for the proposed budget of being 54 million compared to the projected year-end of 40 million, and then in the 2021, it was 35.4 million. And you had mentioned that, I believe, I just wasn't sure that I heard it correctly, that there was an addition of ARPA dollars, there was a reduction in expenses, maybe that was due to COVID. I'm just wondering if you can opine a little bit more as to why the increase in revenue.
Sure. Under the total revenue, where you're comparing the 38 million to the 54 million, that's a difference in that second to last column of 16.5 million. The bulk of that is the transfers in between funds. And then it's also, if you look at our change in anticipated and beginning fund balance, is $7 million more than what we had anticipated or budgeted in our budget last year. So what we thought our funding balance was going to be at the end of this year is $7 million higher than what we had anticipated. So when you take that $7 million plus the $16 million in fund transfer changes around, that's where you get that big difference. So again, operationally, functionally, we're not changing and improving changing 14, 15, $16 million in operation. It is really directly related to those numbers look inflated because of the interfund transfers.
Okay, the question that I've had, and I've had it for quite a while, I know my board has heard me say this, but when we did the ARPA lost revenue, we allocated, I'm just going by memory, like 2.7 million or 2.8 million, somewhere around there due to lost revenue. But then when I heard you with the summary saying that there were less expenses, I'm trying to reconcile those two things.
Yeah, I believe it was 3.2 million, correct?
Okay,
3.2.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Yeah, so of that 7.018 million increase to our beginning fund balance, 3.2 of that is related directly to the ARPA revenue, lost revenue replacement. The other is, as I had started exploring, and I know Commissioner Savas is much more familiar with this, and especially when we take COVID stance into account, when we were budgeting in the last few years, we were budgeting at the same rate of expenditures because we didn't know what was going to be going on, and we were underrating what we were going to bring in for revenue for same reason. But as things come out in this fiscal year, if you remember, I said July 1st or July was about when we started coming out of the pandemic, and that's when we opened the Milwaukee Community Center open to the public again. That's when we started offering some more programs at the aquatic park. Our revenues came in higher than our expenditures by about $4 million or $3.5 million. That's the other amount that makes up that $7 million difference.
okay, so do we really have a loss of revenue of $3.2 million?
We did. Yeah, because that was not from last year, that was from the previous fiscal year when we were really shut down, almost complete shutdown.
Okay,
So
but it's showing up in this budget.
It comes in on this budget, yeah, we had to accept it this past fiscal year for next fiscal year's budget.
Okay, it's still a little bit confusing to me, but I just look at the overall ARPA and the responsibility that we have as a board to, seems like a lot of money, but really it's not when you look at all the incredible competing needs.
And it was truly that 3.2 was a very good representation of our loss during that COVID time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know Chair Smith had something.
Commissioner Schull?
Oh, go ahead, Shaw.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bork, for keeping all these numbers straight. On the summary of revenue and expense sheets, slide number 6, page 6, for this current fiscal year, you have $5,393,000 contingency fund, but you project for FY 22-23, $2,373,000, down $3 million and some change. Why is that, and what happened to that $3 million?
The $3 million got transferred into, I believe, the reserves is where that went, correct? And the reason for it is I'm not sure why we had such a large contingency. We don't need that large of a contingency. There's some GFOA guidelines that you should have. I believe, it was 2 or 3 months of operating costs to make up, and there's a general guideline of 15%. This reflects about 20%, a little higher than the 15, because I, again, we were really looking at what the peak months of our expenditures might be, because things don't come in steadily over the course of the year. So we felt more comfortable with a 20%, but when we had that 5.3 number, that accounted, it was like a 40 or 45% contingency, which is just way too much for our operating budget. So I put that into the reserves.
Got it. Oh, okay. So that $3,020,000 and some change is in that $14 million. Okay, thanks.
For the questions, Commissioner Smith, you had a question? Please.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion, but do you have more questions, Commissioner
Yeah,
Savas?
I want to just point out, page 98. and I want to preface this with a statement, and that is, and Gary may remember, but a couple, 3 years ago, prior to COVID, I had made a request to try to get some cost estimates for what it takes, as close to reality as possible, to maintain the parks within the district boundaries. And I got what I got. I appreciate the work, but I really got was really an averaging of this type of park costs about this much money, and this type of park costs about that much money. And Elk Rock Island was omitted from that, or was not included. I'll just say it was not included in that number. But I do know when I read the agreements for some of these parks, and Milwaukee gets a higher level of service for some of their parks than the remainder of the district by the agreement. I'm not sure people realize that.
I would have to disagree. The highest level of maintenance that we provide at any of the Milwaukee parks is the same level of maintenance that we provide for all of the parks throughout the district. There are some special use parks like the horse arena that we do some additional work at North Clackamas Park, but our basic level of standards are the same throughout our district.
Okay, I'll put that aside for a moment. I think I don't have that prepared to justify, but I think I can find it, I'm pretty sure. But I'm just kind of curious. This is why I preface that agreement. So on page 98, there's 2 lines here that are unusual for that particular park that were not reflected on the report that I got back. And that was midway, it says dock services and debris management with high view construction for 8.8. Is that an ongoing expense or a one-time expense?
Well, and that's not 8.8, that's $8,800.
I'm sorry, 8,800, I'm sorry. I got my numbers all mixed
I
up.
believe that's a seasonal expense.
Okay, so it's annual then?
Yes.
Okay. And down a few lines down below that, geese management for 18,200, is that one time or is that annual?
That's annual as well.
That's annual, okay. I just wanted to just make the statement that it was not reflected in the numbers that I had got back, again, prior to your role here. And I'll dig up the rest, but I just wanted to just point that out for this morning.
Any other questions? Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion.
Chair Smith, you have to have public testimony first. Public hearing first, please.
Thank you.
Okay. So no further questions? Okay. I will now open the public hearing. I'll begin with those present in person, then those registered on Zoom. Please state your name and area of residence. You will have 3 minutes. Okay. No one else no one else wishing to speak in person. I'll ask the clerk to moderate the public testimony via Zoom.
Yes, I do believe we have Grover Jeffrey Bernefeld registered to speak. Tony, will you bring him in?
Of course. Mr. Butterfield, you are unmuted at this time. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you to you all for the work you're doing. I have several comments. First of all, I really want to thank the work that's gone into outlining Recreation-Clackamas once again as being a significant part of where we're headed and what needs to be done, and the focus on the entire district. The first item on that was identify the priorities for NCPRD residents and then develop an overall plan for addressing those priorities. I'm really looking forward to this coming year, having an opportunity to delve into that and have data that supports that. So thank you for moving it in that direction, including it in the budget, as well as we implement it over the year. Secondarily, funding system plan is another I'm thrilled we're doing. Thank you for putting significant amount of money into that, and I'm also looking forward to that unfolding to specifically determine the goals and objectives of the district residents, which leads me to one of the things I want to speak to. At this very board, most of the people on this board actually approved having a plan how we could expand the involvement of a broader population of NCPRD residents, particularly in the unincorporated. We are unfolding that now. Thank you for your support allowing us to do it. We will be selecting new additions to our DAC within a few weeks. And there's an opportunity as this plan comes down to continue to expand that. Lastly, I want to speak specifically to the capital project piece when I look at the specifics about, I hate to do this because I'm district-wide, but this is the one that I specifically keep bringing up, and that is the issue around Milwaukee Bay Park and Zone 1, which is hopefully going to be eliminated before this calendar year is over. But nonetheless, it still shows $2.3 million being put into this budget, which makes it's approved. And yet, we have yet to have the community engagement process to establish the priorities, which is specifically, you all had that in a meeting in January of 2021, where that was planned, it was going, it's on an upcoming agenda, and yet you're approving it in this budget without that informed amount, because it specifically says funds will be informed, the amounts will be informed by such funds using a SDC outreach to a public engagement. And that's the UGMA. That's not the people who live in the city of Milwaukee. That's the people who specifically live in unincorporated sub-area 4, and that's $2.3 million of their money. And I don't know that they have a clue that that money, which was earned in their area, is being attributed to something that I don't know that because they haven't been asked yet. So that really is the core of what I want to speak to. Thank you for all the direction we're headed. I'm really looking forward to this next year. But I need to suggest, as we did last year, there needs to be some sort of footnote on that particular page in the budget that talks about that is subject to allocation priority input from the broader public. So thank you for that, and that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Tony. Is there anybody else registered to speak?
Mr. Chair, I do not have anyone else registered to speak at this time. If there is anyone who would like to provide public comment, please use the raise hand feature. Mr. Chair, I do not have any hands raised at this time.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Seeing no one else who wishes to speak, I will now close the public hearing. Back to the board. Do any members of the committee have any questions or discussion?
I do.
Commissioner Smith.
I'd like to make a motion, and then I would like to address my reasons for it, provided it has a second. I would like to remove any program support and FTE activity from Rock Elk Island.
Do I ask for a second for that motion? Or is that what? Not sure about the procedure here. My apologies.
Yes, you need a second.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it for sake of discussion. I believe it's Elk Rock Island.
Excuse me, Elk Rock Island. Thank you, Paul.
Chair, Trudy, I think your microphone is off. Is it on or off?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should I restate the
Would
motion?
you please? Yes.
Yes. I would like to remove any program support and FTE expenditures for Elk Rock Island.
Is there a second formally?
I second.
Okay. So-
Okay. As I stated before, it's listed on the page of assumed program development under department milestones. It's considered a milestones when it was not voted to include it in Milwaukee Bay Park. I don't see how it is part of Milwaukee Bay Park without that legal action being taken. I think that was possibly an illegal move on somebody's part that's assumed that the NCPR district will, look, Mike, this is called budget creep at its finest. Pretty soon, we're going to be a year or two down the road, and they're going to want to put a boat dock on there and everything else, and we're going to be on the hook for it, if they continue to be in the district. So I am trying to control budgets, as I know the rest of my commissioners are. Your budget is very important to the entire district, just not the city of Milwaukee. So that's why I would like to have the assumption removed that any FTE will be supplying, monitoring, maintaining, offering facilities to Elk Rock Island.
Okay. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I want to, so, Chair, I don't think that there's a tie-in with Elk Rock Island to Milwaukee Bay Park. I think the milestone is separate, so that's just an observation. I could be wrong. But I do want to say, number one, I am a supporter of Milwaukee Bay Park. I've said that over and over again. I want to make sure that's perfectly clear. And I also want to say that, my interest in trying to get the master IGA finalized or done, or even started, discussions even started, frankly, was to take care of these loose ends that I think jeopardize the integrity of the district as well as the future of the district. So I'm trying to do my best to act in the best interest of the district with all of our partners in mind. So I just want to qualify that. And if there's interest in remuneration, I think we can bring that back and put that as a milestone. But I think Commissioner Smith is correct. It's not proper. I think we got some issues there we need to resolve.
Any other comments? Commissioner Fisher?
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that currently Milwaukee owns quite a few of the parks, and we provide services and upkeep to the parks within the district. Is that right?
All of the properties within the Milwaukee portion of the district are owned by the city of Milwaukee.
Okay, and I don't know if Elk Rock, it's been a while since I read the newspaper article about how that left Portland and how that came to, I think, is it part of Milwaukee now?
Yes, they're an IGA between the two of them, and then there was supposed to have been an IGA between them and NCPRD that never wound up happening, I believe. And then the wildfire happened, and that's why we basically
Right.
got into
So,
it with.
I would say, just based on my limited information, well, and first of all, I would rather have this discussion when we're able to really study it and look at it as a whole, and to get advice from the District Advisory Council, which I think is incredibly important for any policy decision that the Board of Directors makes. But I would say that we have a course of dealing already, that the parks that are owned by Milwaukee are serviced by NCPRD, and it has been a process of partnership. So I don't think it would be appropriate at this time to change the facts. This was from 2021. We, in partnership with Milwaukee, restored Elk Rock Island after wildfire. That's something we did. That's good to document. I wouldn't be interested in taking that out, changing history. If there is an interest in moving forward on how we move forward with intergovernmental agreements and who does what and how are they doing it and what's this or what's that, that's a future conversation.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, so this issue, as well as Mr. Bornefeld's issue, I look at the budget, and I said this last year as well, I look at something that's included in the budget is essentially becomes a blessing that it's okay and it's authorized. And those are some issues here. So to include something that there's not even agreement, if Commissioner Fisher can produce an agreement or demonstrate remuneration for that, as I understand it, I've been told, districts cannot invest outside of their boundaries. And this property is outside of the boundaries of the district. That's not a legal action. So I just go back to, I believe, going back to the asterisk, to the January 2019, I believe, agreement that the Board of Directors made with the SDCs, that they get reviewed. So I think that was Mr. Bornefeld's point would be an addition I'd like to make, as well as at least striking that from there right now, or put an asterisk I don't know. I don't know what to do with that, but I think I'm probably going to stick with Commissioner Smith's motion and vote in favor unless there's some alternate way to address this particular issue.
Commissioner Schrader?
So, what a fine mess we're in. And I think largely the mess has happened because we've had, again, the usual. We've had turnover in staff. So, Mr. Bork, you're doing a great job because you're coming in trying to weave all the pieces together from something that, again, because of lack of continuity, in my opinion, of staffing and movement and COVID and wildfires and everything else that we've had to deal with has gotten lost in the shuffle. I have to admit, I agree with Chair Smith and Commissioner Savas that, wow, yeah, I'm not convinced that that piece got lost in the shuffle and that we really did need to have an IGA, okay? But that's not anybody's fault. It's just, oh, well. So this is what we have now. So my question to this board is, based on this conversation, do you want to move ahead with this now, or is this part of a larger conversation that we have with the city of Milwaukee that we've had some major issues with? I think we all know that. And it's become very, I don't want to use the word vitriolic, but at least for me, who likes peace in our time, very uncomfortable, okay, with how we're dealing with each other, and really the conversation about fairness issues in terms of who's our favorite child and our unincorporated area, feeling as if that's been, you know, they've been butting heads with this. So is this something you want to address now? Colleagues, here's my question. Or is it something you want to address, assuming we go into some kind of mediation with Milwaukee and we pretty much point this out as a piece that, again, has been lost in the shuffle along with a master IGA? Because we keep pointing fingers at each other, quite frankly, that, well, we don't need the, you know, we got to do the master IGA and make this fair. And then, you know, our partners in the city of Milwaukee are saying, we don't need, you know, no, just give us the money now. So there's a total lack of trust. Okay, so do we want to do a motion now, or do we want to really have this conversation, get this budget done, and have a conversation with the city of Milwaukee? Gary, haven't they asked for some kind of mediation? Could you refresh?
Yes,
my
but
memory?
just to determine that specific language in the IGA about what's the proper withdrawal statute, what's the proper ORS withdrawal statute.
Should we leave this as a conversation during that
I can
conversation?
address that. You've asked the question.
Yes.
Okay, the reason why it needs to be removed, because we are approving the budget. Budget does not only include numbers, it includes all supporting documents that go with it. If we were to support this as presented, everything in this budget is approved in this committee. It rolls up to the full committee on Thursday for approval. I do not think we should have that in. And Commissioner Schrader, I wasn't going to mention the elephant in the room, but you did.
I know I did.
Milwaukee wants to remove themselves from this district. So therefore, I'm saying to them, fine, we're going to start by removing illegal, and it is illegal that Elk Rock Island is in this budget. And I think that we make a stand here on, we start with this.
Well, my point is, Chair, do you mind?
Oh, I don't care.
My friend? Okay. So my point is that it kind of got included in the budget because things fell through the cracks because of lack of continuity in staffing and how it was being managed. How many, I mean, we've lost, I don't know how many folks in that particular arena. You know, we've lost staff, so nobody was really tracking it as closely as it should have and could have been tracked at this point. I'm not blaming people. I'm just saying that's what happens sometimes. Do you want to take that into consideration? If not,
Commissioner
then
Schull?
I would say we should just go ahead.
Yes, it appears to me that it makes sense to drop this from the budget. You know, NCPRD gave the city of Milwaukee support in repairing this park after the wildfire. Let's go ahead and drop it from the budget, and you can take it up with the city of Milwaukee, and we'll take it from there. But let's drop it off the budget today.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, I just to follow up on Commissioner Schrader and Commissioner Smith's comments, I just want to just say that I've brought this and many issues to the floor in executive session, so this is not the first time. And again, in an cooperative effort, just to clean everything up, and the agreements, just getting the agreements done would have cleaned it up without any bad feelings, but that's been resisted for several years, and we're at this point, and so I have to support this. We have a responsibility to get this right.
Do we have a comment from Budget Committee member Sean, Eric Sean?
I do have a question. Is this a policy change? And if it is a policy change within the purview of the Budget Committee?
I wish Mr. Madcore was here if he's listening. So my opinion, maybe, maybe you're approving. So first of all, you're recommending the budget approval today. You're not approving it. You're recommending it to the NCPRD Board of Directors, who will review this in June for final decision, first of all. Second, that's correct. This is not the time to make policy decisions, but it is to make budget decisions, and this is in your budget. So this is very complicated, Commissioners, and you're also behind schedule. So I recommend you take a vote, see where it lands, and we need to move on. Thank you.
Question, Gary?
Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up? How is this Elk Rock Island in our budget? Mark Barker is shaking his head no. I understand it's absorbed within basic operations. There's not a specific line item. It's historically mentioned in this budget document. There's not an allocation or a line item authorizing Elk Rock Island in this budget. This is a policy discussion.
Let me answer that. That is correct. We've answered that already, but it's the will of this board, what you'd like to do, and there's a motion on the table, so I suggest
Point of order.
vote.
I call for a vote.
Caroline?
Chairman, can I have a vote? Or clerk, can I have a vote?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Sean?
No.
Commissioner Fisher?
No.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
No.
Chair Smith?
Aye.
Chair Gast?
Aye.
So is that, do we need 5 or 6, or what's the math here as far as whether it passes or not?
There are only 9 active seats, there's only 9 active seats, correct, because you only have 4 public members appointed, is that correct?
Correct.
So 4 out of the 5, so 9 is your number. You need 50% plus 1 of 9, which is 5, correct? So you need 5 in favor to make any motion, to make any decisions. So this is 4-3, so it does not meet the threshold of the quorum.
Okay.
You needed 5 votes to do that.
I think staff will probably find a way to make sure in June, when this comes before us for final approval, that it's rectified.
We will have that for you by June, for sure.
Any other questions for the committee?
I have a question.
Commissioner Fisher.
So given my view, and I might be wrong, somebody can correct me, but that this is a policy decision, what is our notice responsibility so that we are able to have correct public input and also input from the advisory board of NCPRD?
Can I make one clarification, just to build on what Commissioner Fisher is saying? And that is that I raise it as a monetary issue and a policy issue. What I'm voting on is the legality of spending money outside the district. That is a financial, budgetary issue.
So how about, assuming you want to move on, before this comes to the Board of Directors for final approval, first, I want to work with you, Mike, to make absolutely sure there was no agreement ever made on this, because Mike and I weren't here then. That doesn't mean it wasn't made. We need to find out for sure there was no agreement made. If there was no agreement made, then we'd be prepared to have all the data you need to make sure this is not reflected in the budget when you make the final decision in June. That'd be my recommendation.
Yeah, if there was an agreement and there was remuneration, we're okay. If there's an agreement and there's no remuneration, we're still not okay.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and that was kind of my point of like why I'm like, whoa, let's find this out first and double check. So,
Commissioner
anyway.
Savas.
So last but not least, and I guess I really ask the district administrator if we need to make a motion, but I would like to include the asterisk that was mentioned by the citizen who called in and spoke in earlier, that it's preliminary. These are preliminary numbers subject to a final decision by the Board of County Commissioners, or the Board of Directors, actually.
Right, so that was a budget asterisk you made a year ago, last year during this same budget committee process. My memory was related to Milwaukee Bay Park, that there would be no final financial commitments made until the construction IGA was completed, the financial IGA was completed, and the system development charges zone issue was resolved.
Well, that's not, well, This is about the SDC policy. It's not about Milwaukee Bay Park in
Okay.
particular. It could affect it, sure, but it's not about Milwaukee Bay Park. It's about that January 19
Okay.
decision by the board to go back. And so, Gabby, to give clarification afterwards, but this does not specifically affect only Milwaukee Bay
Okay.
Park.
My recommendation is a budget note is not necessary because frankly, it's not binding, but it's clear that if the board's giving me that direction, Mike and I will make sure that that's handled
Okay.
ASAP.
Any further questions? Okay. I will now entertain a motion on the budget.
I move that the committee approve the 22-23 budget as presented in the amount of $54,935,941 for North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District, and impose the maximum permanent tax rate of $0.5382 per $1,000 of assessed value within district boundaries.
Is there a second?
Correction.
I believe he said dollars and not cents.
I'm quoting directly from the script.
It's 54.83 cents, not dollars.
Elizabeth? That is correct, because .53 is cents. It's said in the term dollars. I want to confirm, Sandra or Elizabeth, is that the correct phrasing for a tax rate? Yeah. Mhm. Okay.
Well, that's news to me that cents means the same thing as dollars.
Point.
All right.
We can make, if you'd like to make, if the maker of the motion would be willing to say cents, that's fine as well.
Yeah, if you did that, you would strike point.
Right.
So was it seconded?
Was there a second?
I didn't hear a second, no.
I'll second.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded that the committee approve the 2022-2023 budget as presented in the amount of $54,935,941 for North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District and impose the maximum permanent tax rate of .532
53.82 cents.
cents per $1,000 of assessed value within district boundaries. Any other questions? Commissioner Scholl?
I've got a question. That rate per thousand, that is unchanged, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
It's the same rate.
Hearing no further questions, clerk, would you please call the poll?
Mr. Sean?
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
No.
Commissioner Scholl?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Chair Smith?
No.
Chair Gast?
Aye.
Approved 5-2.
Okay, the vote is approved, 5-2. The motion is passed. Is there any further business before this committee? Hearing none, this committee is adjourned.